Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kelly Smith. Welcome to the Open Book Festival. So today's talk is called Neighbourhood Watch, and I'm thrilled to be chatting to Terry Ann Adams. And yes. And welcome Mandla, Lishivha.
Thank you.
And Rhys. A very warm welcome to all three of you. Before we begin, could you please tell everybody what your pronouns are?
Yes, I'm they, them.
Thank you.
Welcome, and I have invented this new system called primary pronouns and secondary pronouns. So I am they, them, she, her, on the weekends.
Yes, in light of that, my primary pronouns is he, him, and secondary pronouns they, them.
And what about you, Kelly?
And I'm she. Thank you so much.
All right.
Great. For those of you who might not know much about our authors today, please allow me to tell you a little bit more about them. So, Terry Ann Adams hails from Eldorado Park. The 20-something writer spent her childhood playing with imaginary friends and writing poems, and started her writer's journey at the tender age of 12 when she wrote a mini memoir detailing her struggle to be accepted into mainstream schooling as a person with albinism. A cultural commentator, they haven't stopped writing since then. Terry Ann's work, written in English and Afrikaans, is inspired by and predominantly feature colored people of South Africa. Their debut novel, Those Who Live in Cages, was inspired by their grandmother, Frances Poppy Adams. Their most recent book is a collection of short stories titled White Chalk. Welcome Mandla Lishivha is a freelance journalist and PhD candidate at the University of Pretoria. He has a Master's of Arts in Journalism and Media Studies, a Bachelor of Arts with Honours in Anthropology, and a Bachelor of Arts in Media Studies and Anthropology. Welcome worked as a travel writer for Getaway magazine for 3 years and has written for the Journal of Contemporary African Studies, Daily Maverick, Mail and Guardian, Reuters, GQ, and City Press, where he served as the Arts and Lifestyle co-editor. His piece, Site Visits, was published in the second volume of the Gerald Clark anthology, As You Like It, African Perspectives on Gender, Sexuality, and Justice. Rhys is a Cape Town novelist, columnist, playwright, and screenwriter. Their debut book, Columnist, won the K. Sello Dacre Prize and the CakeNet Rapport Prize in the film category in 2019. Chase's weekly column, Sekevata, is published in Rapport. Can we have a round of applause for our authors, please? So I simply adored all three of these books, obviously. They're all very different from each other, but they paint such incredible pictures of the different communities that the three of you come from. And speaking of community, there's a quote by Brian Solis that says, "Community is much more than belonging to something. It's about doing something together that makes belonging matter." So I'm very excited to chat about community and belonging today. And Terry, I'd like to start with you. So your book is called White Chalk, and it's a collection of 18 stories that are funny, heartbreaking, incredibly vivid. I was also gobsmacked to learn that you wrote it in 3 months, which is an incredible feat. What was that like for you?
I ended up in a mental rehabilitation facility about 6 months later.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a good thing though. I had some shit to sort out, but it was very, it was cathartic. It was this time pressure that my late publisher Nadia Khutam put on me was. I didn't know it at the time, but it was what I needed because I was never going to finish that short story collection. I was always going to doubt myself. I was always going to be like, well, this is not right. This is not working. Let's review this. And I think that's what took me 3 years to write my first book, and that's why whatever I'm writing now is still at chapter 1 because of that doubt factor. So it was very harrowing, but it was very cathartic, and I think it was one of the best things Nadia could have left me with.
Wow. And if you had a choice now to write another book in the same space of time, would you take that challenge on?
Mm-mm.
That's a definite no. Okay, and all the stories are set in Eldorado Park, which is where you're from. And what did you want to convey about the neighborhood and its people when you wrote the book?
I think I will start by saying so about 1 or 2 or 3, I don't know, are locationless. One is in a fictional location, and there's one that's specifically in Bella Vista, which is where I spent my teenage years. But the spirit of Aldo's does run through all of them. And because Aldo's is always home, you know? You move out of a place, but it always stays home. And I think the thing I wanted to convey in all of the stories was the complexity of what is the Johannesburg colored community. And how people box, you know, colored people in general. I'm very sorry if you don't like to refer yourself as colored. I am so sorry. I'm going to be using the word. But people box us in general, and people have this notion of what it is to be colored. But that does not exist, darling. We are complex, we are vibrant, we are a people with a culture, we are a people with a history, we are so much more. And I wanted to show that in the book. And, you know, some of us have money. I wanted to show that too. Not me. I don't have money.
I love that, because we are most certainly not one-dimensional. You write a vast range of characters from different cross-sections of the community, and even though I've never been to Eldorado Park, I recognize some of your characters from the get-go, just from people that I grew up with. And there's a story called The Owens, and I love how you describe them, and also their dialogue. Can you tell us about the story and the inspiration?
Yo, the Owens nearly became a novel, guys, but but God stepped in. So I wrote the Owens immediately after the Nathaniel Julie's tragedy, which, if you haven't read the book, you know, now you're going to go find out why. And I wrote it because the story of Nathaniel Julie's, and fun fact, where Nathaniel Julie's lived is around the way from where I grew up, so around the way from my grandmother's house. So I knew exactly the community that Nathaniel grew up in. And I just remembered everybody saying about him that he was well loved by the community, and that's where the character of Dampis then comes out. And I started building this story first around Dampis. Dampis was the main character. And then I was like, no, man, I've never written colored masculinity. Let me try that for a spell, you know, and then the Owens was born.
And it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning. I love it. You must read The Owens. There's another story that I loved. It's called Beaches. And in Beaches, you write about 2 girls with albinism who are strangers to each other and happen to be in a mall at the same time. And their families force them to interact, and it's mortifying for them. And even though the family means well, it ends up inadvertently being an exercise in othering them. And would you tell us what the story represents to you?
Do you know that literally happened to me in the McDonald's last week?
Wow.
When it happened, I was like, oh my God, yours, Amber. And it was hilarious. It was the same old memories of, oh, fuck, not again. Sorry, if there are children at the back, I cannot see you. So excuse my language. So this lady, she comes up to me, but she's dragging this girl behind her. And at first, because I can't see, I'm not seeing what's happening. I'm just on my phone, you know, waiting for my lift, trying to drink a latte. And she's like, come say hi. And I was like, oh God, not again. And here pops out this really scared, I think she was like 8 or 10-year-old. And her mom is like, you know, she's never so shy. I don't know why she's like this. And I was like, because you're forcing her to speak to a stranger. And every YouTube video says, don't speak to strangers. And now you're making it happen. You know, not to question your parenting or anything, but that's kind of contradictory. So, but what that exchange, and that's why I left it for the end of the story, that exchange is my albinism journey. It's people feeling like they have a right over your conversation, they have a right over your body, they have a right over your time, just because you have a disability. And yes, it is, I hate to say this because I feel like I'm making an excuse, but yes, it's well-meaning, you know. There are people that really, really mean well. But I would like you to put yourself in the situation, and I like to use this example because I think it's the most telling or the most accurate. So I see Welcome, and then I see another black person, and then I go, hey, black people talk to each other. And, you know, it's that thing of, oh, okay. So why are we talking to each other? Besides for the fact that we have the same skin condition, like, why are we exchanging? And especially when it happens with kids, because now that child feels like the only person they can talk to is a person who also has albinism. And they feel compelled to because your mom said you must do it, right? So in your adulthood, you are taught already that you just need to give people space because you have albinism. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. And before I move on to Welcome, I'm curious as to why your book is called White Chalk.
I chose the title because chalk is the most powerful thing, yet it's the most fragile. We used, it's not an egg, but you guys get what I'm trying to say. So we use chalk to teach, but it can be very easily wiped away with a wet faduk. We use chalk to write ourselves on the pavement. You know, Terry was here, Chase reads, you know, we do that. But as easily as we've written ourselves down into legacy, into memory, someone with a bucket of water can come and wipe that out, erase that immediately. And I feel that that presents the fragility of existence as a marginalized person. It's so easy for you to make space for yourself, and it's as easy for someone to erase you.
Sure. Wow, that's powerful. Thank you. I'm going to come back to you later, Terry. We need a bit of a moment. I need a bit of a moment. Thank you again. Welcome. So your book is called Boy on the Run, and it's a memoir.
Yes.
And it paints an incredibly colorful picture of the community that you come from and where you grew up, and your journey of becoming after experiencing the trauma of your mother being murdered. And I'm absolutely in awe of how you've honored your mother's life, both together and while without her. And I can't begin to imagine what it took for you to write about your experience. What made you decide to tell your story?
Well, like you said, the big objective or premise or drive for writing the book was the tragedy I encountered at the age of 12 when I walked in on a scene where my mom had been shot by her boyfriend, who had also shot himself. And so she was 32, which is a year older than I am right now. Sure. And she had me as her second youngest son. I have an older brother who's 4 years older than me. And she was a fabulous woman. She was young, she was free, she was independent, she was stylish. You know, I think you can kind of get
That's apparent.
where I'm getting with this. But as a result of, and she loved me, she adored me, and you learn or discover that as you read in the book that she absolutely adored me, and I knew that she adored me. And I always felt like her life was disrupted, that it was wrong for her to have died at such a young age. And I was saying, I actually had an interview earlier, and there was a question about why I wrote the book, and I said, I was actually scared. As a kid, after having lost my mom, I was scared I would forget what she looked like, what she smelled like, all the memories we had, all the love she'd ever shown me. I was very scared that by the time I'm 40, 30, 50, 60, and you know, as a kid, it seems like forever that these years will be, especially without her. So I wrote it because I wanted to keep her alive for myself, so that even when I did forget, with age and time, I would have a tangible reminder of the life she had and the love and impact it had on me as a young black gay boy. And I really felt she affirmed me in so many ways in who she was, in how she carried herself through the world. And that a man came in and just, abruptly ended it, always felt so unjust, so wrong. And I always felt I had to do something to correct or, honor that. So it makes me so happy when you say that you love how I honor her life, both between my relationship with her and independently as a young woman raising a boy. Because I felt like that life, needed to be honored somehow.
And you've immortalized her, absolutely. Beautiful.
Thank you.
And how does your experience shape your views on gender-based violence and femicide in our communities today?
Women are constantly, and that was the other big impetus, of course, for wanting to write this book, because although this is my story, I know that it's many other people's stories. Actually, the following day after the tragedy, the murder, the death, we went out. There was someone taking pictures. Sorry, I'm not sure if it was a journalist or from the police station, but there was someone taking photos, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a big story. This is such a tragedy. This is going to be in the newspaper. So in the next day, not that I was like, oh, she's famous, she's in the paper. But I just thought at least something about her, that it wasn't just any other day. And we went to go get the paper, and when we got the paper, there was a story in the paper about a woman who had been murdered and her tongue was cut out by her boyfriend. And it wasn't my mom. Like, someone else had gone through the exact same thing the day before. And that stuck with me, and there are more, even on social media, the trends for calling for social justice, justice for so-and-so, justice for Inene, which, I also talk about in the book. When these incidents happen, for me, it's my personal story. And I always felt that, I do feel that we don't talk about the femicide and gender-based violence with enough complexity and nuance for the kind of damage that they cause, It's one thing for us to tweet and call for justice on social media, but it is another to have people have to pick their lives up and rebuild themselves after having experienced these very tragic encounters of violence. And I wanted to put a face, a story of what happens when we have to rebuild ourselves as a result of this tragedy. And, to also, part of my commitment to writing the book and writing it as honestly and as vulnerably, is that a word? I think it can be now. I like it. Anyway, as I committed to being brave in writing this book and telling things that might even put me at the edge of my own seat, And part of that is to really inspire people or have people thinking differently, people who are violent, people who are abusive in relationships, people who do murder and beat women up all the time. I wanted them to be able to have an empathetic experience as well of what it means to have to deal with the repercussions of this kind of violence. So I'm definitely, using this moment, my voice, in whatever ways I can, to speak out against femicide, gender-based violence, homophobia, transphobia, you name it. But I think it's also important to me that I also, do it lovingly, without being, what's the word? Apologetic or, too forgiving, without being too forgiving. It is very important to me that for someone who is a perpetrator of gender-based violence, it's important to me that they have an empathetic experience of what it means to have to deal with what it is they do.
Because it is relentless and it is all around us.
It is all around us. And, you know, in whatever ways we can, I think we must use, you know, our voices and what we can to speak out against it. And for me, you know, the tragedy, yes, is that my mom is no more, you know, but I'm still here. And my saving grace is that when I'm no longer here, you know, I'll go wherever she went, and I'll find her on the other side, as I know she'll be looking or waiting for me on the other side. So that also propels me to be fearless about my time here, because there is a lot of fucked up shit here. And sorry for the French again. But there's a lot of fucked up shit in our society. And I feel like we are not brave enough, daring enough in speaking out around these challenges. And part of speaking out isn't also from an intellectual perspective, but from a personal story of this is what this has done to me. And this is what this does to people. I think the better we're able to have a deeper understanding of these issues and how rampant they run in our society, you know, the better we can be able to create more empathetic people, more empathetic and reflective men, rather.
Absolutely, and more understanding. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. Can you tell us how is the way that you experienced community when you were growing up different to how you experience community now as an adult?
Growing up, I mean, I was a tender, soft, or feminine boy growing up, and I was teased a lot for being, you know, morphy, trashy, like different words were held at me because of how I walked, how I talked, but strangely enough, my family, my immediate family was rather protective of me. I think they knew that, oh my gosh, the world is not going to be so kind to your kind. And so they protected me and loved me and assured me. I think part of the reason my mom assured me so much and affirmed me so much is she wanted to silence out or, you know, drown out the hateful sneers and comments with her love. Because when I did get the remarks about being a morphe and queer, when those were hurled at me, they didn't sting as much because I knew I was loved and adored at home. And this was actually, even in school, yes, there are always the rotten potatoes who will slur those remarks, but for the most part, you know, I was still able to have meaningful connections with kids in school, and a big part of, I think a big theme in the book of how I overcome and deal with the grief are the friends I meet along the way who show up to love me and encourage me. And I had a lot of that growing up. Like the boys in my township, you know, adored me, and I think were somewhat protective of me. And that's also not something we hear a lot about the township, you know. It's always that, oh, homophobic, it's terrible. But my experience for the most part is that I was adored and protected by my community. And how I'm experiencing community then versus now, you know, I've certainly become more accepting of myself and overcame the negative comments and slurs that people threw at me because I was queer. So I'm braver to be myself, and I seek out my people. I seek out, you know, people who do look like me, more, and or who are experiencing the kinds of things I'm experiencing, I'm a lot more deliberate about the kinds of communities I get to participate in, and the kinds of contributions I want to make in those communities. And I think part of growing up queer without other queer people around you, for me has also meant that I am proactive and intentional about wanting to create the kinds of communities that will mean that the next kid doesn't have to feel as alienated growing up, making sure that communities, my communities, in ways that they have been silenced or marginalized before, I'm intentional about making those visible and making them visible with in the most humane and nuanced ways, So I think visibility is a key part of how visibility and being intentional about the kinds of communities I participate in is probably has been a big shift in terms of how I experience community now versus when I was a baby or younger.
And I definitely got that sense from your book about when you speak of your family and your friends adored you. There's a definite sense that your friends were also like family because of the way that they supported you. But speaking about participating in community now as an adult, there's a beautiful part of the book where you describe walking the runway at a queer ball for the first time.
Yes.
And it's a moment where you honor your queerness and your mother simultaneously. And I'd love you to read that piece for us. But could you first explain what a queer ball is for those who may not know? And I'm going to pass the book to you now.
Okay, so this was the La Grande Ball in Johannesburg. It was the first ball that was organized, and they said there were going to be houses. So our housemate, Jesse, I was supposed to have dinner with him yesterday, but couldn't. Our housemate, Jesse, there was a call for the ball, and our housemate, Jesse, put out the call, put up our names for the ball as a house. We are staying in a gay community, not gay, a gay community, yes, but a house with three of my gay friends. So the four of us, gay, living in one house in West Dean, and for the ball, each house had to have 4 people, and we were possibly of all the people, the only ones who were a real house, staying together at a house. Although our house is the palace, and we keep saying it's not a house, it's a palace, because queens reside in palaces. So yes, so they put out the promo or the communication for the ball. The first ball is happening, and announced our house with our faces without our consent, because and so which was a smart move for Jesse to do, because there was no way we were going to compromise our street cred by backing out. So we saw it through. We saw the ball through, and each one, there were different categories, so each one had to walk a category. There was Kotane Realness. Mvuyo did the 2-in-1 reveal look. Jesse was doing face and body, and I was doing African royalty.
Read to us about African royalty. Read to us.
More reading, less talking. Okay, so I spent most of the show backstage getting ready. I didn't want to come out earlier for the reveal. I wanted all jaws on the floor when I stepped on that stage. I have graced stages with public speaking and debating, but nothing compared to the adoration and sheer joy I saw on every face I looked at when I came out. People were screaming my name like it was something I didn't know and had to know. I took 2 steps and waved my hand like the queen I knew myself to be. I opened the red velvet clutch that I had stuffed with glitter and spilled it before me, before giving the purse to Jesse behind me, who helped me to the stage. I sashayed across the stage, walked faster, and made that runway my playground. I was twerking my butt in the shimmering gold jumpsuit that could have easily belonged to Diana Ross herself. While flipping around hair so long, Beyonce, Nicki Minaj, and Diana Ross would have been jealous. The audience, literally the hair was up to here. The audience's screams exacerbated the twerks and the hair flips. My flower crown fell off. It was total bliss being out on stage, looking that good and knowing it. I had always worn my flower crown not as a playful gimmick, but because I felt in my heart that I was a queen, beautiful and powerful, on the inside and the outside. I put on the flower crown to make sure I never forget that about myself, despite the curious, flattering, and shocked faces clapped at me. After what Peter did to my mom, I can never quite call myself a man again. It is a tarnished name. I consider myself a dude, but one who is powerful as a queen and not a king. So when regular strays clap me nasty looks on the streets, I keep my head high despite them and walk on proudly like the queen I am, beautiful and powerful. Walking on that stage was a gift to myself. It freed me from all the shame I was ever made to feel for being gay and femme. In a way, the look of adoration I saw in the audience was the look I had seen so many times on my mama's face. It was a loving look that wiped out the memory of hateful ones. I saw it when I would sashay around for her on days we would play dress, when she would put lipstick on me, makeup, and adorn me with her duke and chains before letting me pounce around the house with oversized bangles hanging on my wrist. She made me queen. It's as though she was freeing me from seeing myself as one thing. She allowed me to embrace myself as both a mask and especially femme boy. Walking on that stage at the ball for the first time felt like I was only beginning to love my mother's child fully. It was a celebration, like the coronation of a queen coming into herself. I never felt more queen. Thank you.
Thank you, welcome.
I absolutely enjoyed the ball. Would do it again.
That is incredibly
This stage is
beautiful.
also
Thank
great,
you.
and this audience is lovely.
Afterwards, later on, we can twerk on the stage together. Thank you. Chase, I'd like to pick your brain now about your new book, Misfit. So Misfit is a collection of new and reworked stories from your column in the Rapport newspaper and is written in caps like your previous book, Kenneth. And I'd love to know, what was it like to transition from novelist to newspaper columnist?
Oh, yeah, no. It was, for me, it's the same thing almost in terms of, can I just ask, sorry, Trudy, is that Sandra sitting behind you? No. Over there. Sorry, because my drama teacher, I thought it was my drama teacher sitting there from university, and the things she taught me in her drama class about studying a scene, about what the character wants, all these things that the actors need to know. Those questions that the actors ask is the same questions I answer as a writer now, because I've studied scenes my whole life in drama class. So when it comes to writing, automatically in my DNA, it's like character, what do they want, where are we, all those same questions. So that is the same sort of formula I use for everything, whether it's a novel, a play, a TV dinger, or for a column, it's the same thing. So I write very cinematically. Thank you.
And that you do. And it was very difficult for me to choose a favorite story, so there's no way I'll ask you what your favorite story is. But one of my favorites is Tongue In, Tongue Out. And I think it's a great example of othering and policing done within communities. And can you tell us about the challenges of trying to fit in that come up in that story?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so Tongue In, Tongue Out is based on a movie that is, I'd say, the most popular movie op die Kaapse vlakte, Blood In, Blood Out, a gangster
Darling.
flick from
Vatos
the 90s,
Locos.
Vatos Locos. Still today, you'll hear people shouting Vatos Locos in the street, So I had a lisp as a little baby, as a little child. I still have a sibilant S, if you can hear it, but naturally my tongue wants to do this. And this is how I spoke as a little child. And so I went to a Model C school. Not quite, but anyway, Model C school. And there they were like, "Nee, die kind praat hier regie." And so they were giving me sort of elocution lessons. And the teacher would hold a tissue in front of my face, and I had to say, "Where?" But I had to speak so that the tissue blows when I say where, so it's where, and not because, because where I come from, it's where, it's just where, but now it has to be where, So that so at school I got this sort of like, and this is before drama training even, so at school I got that sort of, this is how you need to speak. And at home with my lisp, I also got voice training, but in a different way. My father and his chommies were the Casanova boys. They were like proper gangsters. And this movie just came out at that time. I think I was like 7 years old. And they were obsessed with this movie. So on VHS, elke dag, all day, it's Vatos Locos, it's Blood in Blood Out playing. And I stood up in front of them once, and I was like doing the thing from the movie with them, and I was like, "Vatos locos! Vatos locos!" And these men were just like, they just were laughing so hard, and my dad got embarrassed because, like, whatever, fragile masculinity. So later, he would sit me down, and he would make me say that phrase, "Vatos locos," all the time. And that was the phrase that made me say S. Like, I did it unconsciously one day. I was like, "Vatos locos." That's how you do the S, Vatos locos. So I had the sort of weird combination of like this sort of white, because it was a white school at the time. I was one of the first people of color at the school, of this sort of white world, which was telling me you're wrong, the way you're speaking is wrong. And then also at home, I had this sort of, the way you're speaking is wrong. Also because to have a lisp, a sibilant S is quite queer, it's quite gay, it's a gay voice. And so that was what my father was like, really what the problem was. You can't be this queer kid, especially not here in front of my Casanova boys, which is such a queer name anyway. Casanova boys, all right. I think so. So it was an interesting childhood experience, and that sort of. But I never with the men, with that sort of manliness, that sort of gangster da. I thought it was so camp. As a child already, I was like, "Oh my God, please go," And I never like. I know some people, a lot of boys feel like, "Oh, my father is this, and my father wants this of me, so I'm going to try to become like them." Not me. I was like, "Not I will survive." I was like, no, I saw it as camp, I saw it as weird, and I didn't want to be it, but so it didn't really affect me that much, that sort of masculinity from his group of friends, you know? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Not to give too much away, but your closing story, Misfit, is exquisite. And if you want to know why Chase sometimes wears an earring with a key, you're going to have to buy the book and read the story Misfit, okay? But I'd like to know, who have you dedicated this book to and why?
Yes, the babies. At the beginning of the book, my dedication is for the babies. My first book, Kinders, was for Ors, whoever Ors is, but this one is for the babies, because I feel very strongly that there's this young group, or these young kids, the babies, who are coming up, who need guidance, who are misfits, and there's a lot more of us now. And I wish, as a child, I had someone like us. I don't know if you identify as misfits. I do. But someone like us in our books, to see, I'm leaving breadcrumbs for the babies. I'm leaving tools for these kids that are coming, because I do feel like my work at this point is not that supported, and that my actual audience is coming. They're still coming, because I do feel like and I said this at my launch as well, but I am ahead of my time, but not in an arrogant way, not in an arrogant way. Maybe a bitchy. But, no. But it's ahead of its time. I've always felt like that. With the queerness as a kid, not accepted, suddenly a few years later, knows I'm all, queer, and it's fine to be queer. With all sorts of ideas that I would have that later become part of the zeitgeist, if you will. So I do feel like a lot of the things that I'm writing about in this book now, especially for the audience, the Rapport newspaper audience, it's a bit like what pronouns, gender, post-binary, not even non-binary, post-binary, what praat je van, So, and it's there. I'm leaving these tools. It's there. These babies are coming. It's obviously also for use. It's also for use. You can also read it. But I do feel like I'm leaving. I feel like it's a legacy project. And at my desk, on my computer, it just says the babies. So every time I'm like, God, must I sit and write this and whatever, I see the babies. And I don't know who they are. I know they're coming. Maybe they're sitting here right now in front. But I'm just like, the babies. Okay. And then I go. So it's really like my muse. They're my muse,
Yes.
These kids that are coming up,
And you are absolutely leaving a legacy. There's no doubt about that. No doubt.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please read Sandy from Scarborough for us, because Sandy from Scarborough is worth sharing with our audience today.
Sure. I guess the context is here in the story, okay? Sandy from Scarborough. Ek woon in die Kaapse hyper-segregated Deep South. Die mense wat die lentilgordyn definieer, is kaalvoet, vegan en gedrapeer in tie-dye. Hulle werk hard om in harmonie met die natuur te leef. Dit is die mers waar hulle my octopus teacher gefilm het. Maar hulle doen min om met hulle other menslike bure te integreer. Hier is ons so ontkoppel van mekaar dat dit steeds 'n anomaly is as ons 'n persoonlike wêreld in mekaar kruis. Soos die vrou met dreadlocks en 'n stick-on glitterbindie op haar voorkop, die wie ek by my voordeur uitgestik het. Namaste, I'm Sandy from Scarborough. Would you like to buy a bag? Sy hou 'n sak van hemp op met 3 woorde daarop en ek lees soos 'n foundation phase onderwyser en wys met haar vinger na elke embroidered word: live, laugh, love. Ek frons vir die platitude en wil nie dankie sê, maar Sandy is een van die mense wat heeltyd direk in jou oë staar. Sy kyk nooit weg nie. Ek voel ongemaklik en miskien 'n bietjie guilty, omdat ek kan sien dat sy self die sak gemaak het en dis haar kuns. En ek wil nooit 'n artist ontmoedig nie. Ek sê, "Daai is 'n baie nice font." Sy sê, "Dis magic bags." Ek het my kristals daarin gehou om met geneseende energie deur die materiaal te dring. Kyk, ek weet my area wemel van Wiccans, maar wat se doekom verkoop die vrou dan nou by die woord, ja? Sandy verduidelik al aan sonne om oog te knip. Dit maak nie saak waar jy is nie. As iets negatiefs met jou gebeur, gooi jy net my sak oor jou skouers en jy lees hierdie 3 woorde. Dit sal jou remind om te live through it, love it, or just laugh at it. Ek kyk oor haar skouer na die 3 shady jongens wat vinnig in die pad afhaloop. Ek sê, "Sandy, hoekom verkoop jy jou sakke hier?" Sy sê sy moes haar catering besigheid sluit weens lockdown. Embroidery was 'n hobby, maar nou wil sy geld daaruit verdien. Ek sê, "Het jy enige ander designs?" Sy wys 'n ander sak waarop "Just say namaste" gestik is. Langs die woorde is daar klein embroidered diere en familiefigure van mans met spiese. Ek sê, "Is jy suppose om sand rotskunst te wees, sand rock art?" Sy sê, "Ja, presies. Ek was op 'n silent retreat in die Drakensberg en ek was so geïnspireerd deur die beelde op die rotse. Ek het gedink, ek moet dit embroider." Ek het gehoop daar was 'n rede agter die artistic choice om die 2 verskillende kulture so te juxtapose. I mean, miskien wou Sandy 'n statement maak oor South Africa se mengelmoes identiteit. en geskiedenis. Ek sê maar namaste is mos Indian en die is local sandtekeninge. Sandy knik haar kop, ja, ek sit die nama in namaste. Toe ek vir haar vra of dit reg is, toe ek vir haar vra of dit reg is om kultuursimbole te gebruik wat sy glad nie eens verstaan nie, loer Sandy vir my die nou gestrekte oë en sê eintlik is ons almal Bushmen. 'n paar gunskote klap in die verte en Sandy se oë skiet wyd oop van paniek en sy gaan lê dadelik plat voor my voordeur. Ek sê, "Hi, kyk, there's a guru on my stoep." My ore is al ou gewoon die ontploffings. Ek sê, "Moenie worry nie, hulle is in die ander pad." Sandy bewe so, haar bindie val skoons van haar voorkop af. Sy sê, "Hoe kan julle so leef? Hoe kan julle so leef?" Ek trek my skouers op en sê, "We live, love, laugh through it." Sandy wil nie wag. Sy wil eers wag om haar seil klaar te maak. Sy sê nie eers goodbye nie. Sy haloop net vinnig na haar kar toe. 'n Opgeblaaste pink yoghurtbol rol van een kant na die ander op haar backseat soos sy wegjag.
So good. That is so good.
Chase, thank you so much. And that's just a small taster of the stories in Misfit. I'm keeping an eye on the time, and we still want to open the floor to questions. So I have one question for all three of you, and then I still would like Terry to read something from their book. So my question is, what did you say to someone who is struggling to feel like they belong and need help navigating being an outsider? For anybody who would like to answer.
Oh, read Chase's book. Wow. No, I think both Welcome and Chase touched on this, but we are living in this charmed time where we are not outsiders anymore. We are the insiders. The straights, the heteros, the what's all of them, the oppressors. They are the outsiders now, you know. I think we've made such a community for ourselves, and we've all just decided that, you know, fuck it. It doesn't matter what they think of us. It is now how we can support each other, how we can love each other, how we can show up for each other, how we can stand up for each other. And I think if you feel like an outsider, there's a community there for you. You will find the community. Look on social media, look inside of your heart, look to God. You will find that community, and you will find a place to belong.
Thank you so much, Terry. Before we open the floor to questions, I'd like to end off with Terry reading from her story, Ma's House. So, entire communities are anchored by grandmothers' homes, and unsurprisingly, all your books feature grandmothers. Coincidentally, Chase and Welcome's books also feature Oprah, but you'll have to buy the books to find out where she features.
One of my favorite
Okay, right. Next book. Okay, mine is not so funny, guys. It's like, I'm not Chase. Okay, I'm not going to give context. Please buy the book. As soon as the warm sun comes out in September, Ma makes us clean the house like it's never been cleaned before. She takes out the brasso and the vim and puts us to work dusting and wiping and scrubbing everything. We buff the windows with pieces of the star and the burger, using the faces of people we wish we were to get the windows shining so that Ma can be happy. We go outside and get sprayed with hose pipes or have buckets of water thrown on us. There's a beauty pageant at school and a concert at church. There are rains in October and blossoms, and Ma's garden starts to look green again. We wait impatiently for the peach tree even though we are well aware that it only bears fruit in February. The house smells like rainwater and cobra polish. And on 5 November, we run home from school trying to avoid the high school children who are waiting for us, ready with their shoe polish. One of my cousins isn't as fast as the rest of us, and she gets caught. Ma is as ready as Guy Fawkes to wage war, but is reminded by our mother that being smeared with polish is a rite of passage. And one day, when my cousin is in high school, she will do the exact same thing to a poor, slow primary school child. This is Ma's house, the HQ, the epicenter, the fortress of solitude. The lounge has seen the coffins of 2 uncles and my grandfather leave, never to return. It has seen matric dance partners waiting nervously while Ma gives them frikadella and sausage rolls. The kitchen has smelled kusistus and baboti and jam squares and milk tarts. It has catered for weddings, funerals, baby showers, and birthday parties. It holds the secrets of 1,000 women and the lies of 100 men. The rooms have been arenas for modeling shows and catfights. They have seen children grow from infant to adult. They have stored gallons of tears and bucket loads of laughter. The outside toilet is a boardroom and a war room. It is where we strategize and discuss. It holds all our dreams for the future and our hopes for a better life, because we are told at school that this life is not enough. This is Ma's house, with a garden full of aloe and marigolds, with a freshly polished stoop and the woodshed full of tools and old school books. This is where we are, where we were, and where we will become.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful.
I cried.
My new episode.
Both arrived.
Thank you so much, Terry. It's like really lump in the throat stuff. We're ready to open the floor to questions. Please keep your questions concise and note that we're looking for questions and not comments. If you raise your hand, somebody will bring a microphone to you. Is there anybody who has any questions for any of the authors?
No.
Are we feeling shy? There's somebody over there. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for a wonderful panel. I really enjoyed this reading. My question, I've got feeling nervous now, short question, not a comment, to Terry Ann and to Chase. About your second, this is both for you, a second offering. And the first ones, both of you were novels. And so is there sort of pressure when you're doing the second collection or second work? I'm wondering if it's coincidence that you both chose shorter forms, if not the same genre, but not novels again, but shorter stories.
Yeah. Terry?
Jy lyk ek moet eers te gaan. Okay. Firstly, is that Dr. Barbara Boswell?
Yes, it is.
Oh, is it? My fave, my forever fave. I chose short stories because Nadia made me, but I think what I like about short stories is the space for breathing. You know, with a novel, you have to sit with this thing. You have to sit. By the time you're done with your novel, you are those characters. You know, they come to you in your dreams. But with a short story, you write it, you're done, you're dusted, you move on to the next thing. And I think I enjoyed that break from being so immersed in the world of Those Who Live in Cages, that White Chalk was just a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. My stories are most originally from or for the Rapport. So when I spoke to Stevlin from Kwela, my publisher, we were like, okay, let's compile these, but also let's write new ones. And this is what happened with that. When I suddenly had a book, before I was worried about this Rapport audience and are they going to understand what I want to write about. So I was almost like making it for this imaginary target audience that they have, their readership. And when I had the chance to write the book, it was suddenly like, oh no, but this is now for my audience. People are going to buy my books. I can write whatever I want. I can write about my grandpa growing dagga in my private school. Anyway, read the book.
That one's called Booty and the Beanstalk.
Yeah, incriminating my family here. Sorry. No police here. And then I suddenly realized, oh, but why am I split in two? Why are these my stories and these Rapport stories? And I took some of these stories that I wrote initially for you, my audience, and I put them in the newspaper to see, and I was a bitchy bang. I was like, what are they going to say, Uyera? And those pieces that I was a bit hesitant to put in are the ones I get the most responses from, as you know, the DMs for those, and like the most support of. So those short stories were for the report for me, and then I just compiled them into this book. Yeah.
Thank
But
you.
I will write a long form novel. I will.
Any more questions from the audience? Going once? Going twice? Nothing? Well, in that case, we have absolutely run out of time. Thank you so much, Terry Ann. Welcome, Chase. Please can we have a round of applause for our authors?
Thank you.
And can we also please say thank you to Kelly?
Thank you, Chase. So all 3 books are available for purchase, and the authors are available to sign them. Please get all 3. You will not be sorry. Thank you so much to the Homecoming Center for hosting us, and also to the Open Book Festival for being such a fabulous festival.
Yes.
And to you, the audience, thank you so much, and see you next time.
Yeah.